on Long Island outside New York, and yeah, then went to, are you from Long Island as well? Nice. And then went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I studied biology, and then went into consulting, focused on sub-Saharan Africa in food and ag and food and agriculture and healthcare. And then went to UC Berkeley's business school, where I graduated last year. I really honed in on entrepreneurship as it relates to the food industry and most recently the microbiome. And so I've been working on this project, starting a company that's focused on digestive health, so probiotics, if you guys have ever heard of it, as well as different types of fiber, and so how your diet affects your health. I'll try to keep it high level, but we'll go into it. So basically, this is a brand new area of science, right? So you have in your gut, in your intestines, your small and large intestines, you have 100 trillion bacterial cells, right? So this is about 3 to 4 pounds of bacteria, right, which is about equal to the weight of your brain. So this is kind of mind-blowing, right? Who in here knew that you had that much bacteria in your gut? Anyone? Yeah, I mean, no one really did, right? We've always thought about gut flora, but we've never really had the tools to study it. And so this is really a brand new area of science that's very exciting, right? So we've always thought bacteria are bad. You need to really be as hypoallergenic and clean as possible to get rid of bacteria. And now we're learning that you want to go play in the dirt and get exposure to letting a dog licking your face. And that introduction of new bacteria is going to help you. And so you might ask, like, why, how are we just starting to study this? And the answer is actually in hardware and software, and specifically in next generation sequencing. So you guys have you learned about like kind of DNA and how to sequence DNA? And so basically there's this thing called next generation sequencing, and this is, I heard you learned about Moore's law yesterday, right?
Ohm's law.
Oh, who?
Ohm's law.
Oh, Ohm's law, okay.
Moore's law is,
Have you learned about Moore's law yet?
What is Moore's law?
Okay, so Moore's law is basically was a theory put forward by the founder of Intel, where every 2 years, or about every 2 years, you get a doubling in processing power, in computational processing power. And so for sequencing of DNA, it's actually twice as fast as Moore's law. And so Moore's law has held steady since the 1970s, like pretty on pace. And this is twice as fast as that in terms of every single year you get a doubling in how much processing of DNA that you can do. And so this is like totally expanding the field in really remarkable ways that you can now take a DNA sample and it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and faster and better, right? So that the future of scientists in this room can sequence their DNA for less than $1,000 and sequence a sample of your microbiome for less than $50. And when science gets cheaper, then everything else kind of explodes. And that's been kind of like a real catalyst. That's the real reason that this is all happening right now. And yeah, I guess the other component that's you probably appreciate is like how you actually take a sample of your microbiome, right? So how do you actually study these gut bacteria? And the way that you do it is you take a poop sample, right? So when you take a used piece of toilet paper and then you swab it on a Q-tip and then you send it to the lab and they'll sequence the DNA for you. And so what you're doing is instead of sequencing your human DNA, you're sequencing the bacterial DNA, right? So yes, I definitely catch a lot of jokes from my friends and family for studying poop, but it's it's kind of one of these key indicators for how healthy your digestion is and how healthy your immune system is. And so the other component that's so important when it comes to your microbiome is that about 80% of your immune health is housed in your gut, right? So who's heard of white blood cells? Okay, so you know that white blood cells are kind of your body's defense against foreign invaders. And so about 70 to 80% of your white blood cells are housed in your gut, and they're regulated and they interact with those bacteria, such that if you have an imbalance and you're sick, then you can lead to all sorts of autoimmune diseases like diabetes, celiac, Crohn's, asthma, eczema, acne, and those are things that we can really start to understand better and hopefully treat and maybe even cure. So I guess the other component, I hone in on the gut, right? So on your intestines, on the inside. But the microbiome as a term really applies to a large swath of different topics, right? So you have a microbiome of your skin, right? So on your skin, you're covered in bacteria, and understanding how to change those bacteria can help with hydration, with acne, as I said, and just kind of skin health. You have an oral microbiome, so you have bacteria in your mouth that we're beginning to understand how that affects cavities or bad breath. You have a microbiome of your nose, so understanding how that affects allergies and sinus congestion, sinus infections. And of course, you have kind of, one of the companies that I've worked with is studying the bacteria and viruses that are just kind of floating around, right? So these things they're constantly around us. And so understanding how a hospital, the airflow of a hospital can get people sick or get people healthy. Understanding how you can design buildings such that you have better exposure to the outside. I guess one of the last really other huge areas is around for animals and for agriculture. So like how you can manipulate bacteria on a seed such that it grows faster or grows more efficiently. And that's really going to help increase yields and help farmers grow better crops. So this is a huge area that's going to that's changing very large industries in really substantial ways. And so I guess as I mentioned, I think this is kind of one of those kind of, I don't know about you guys, but when I first learned about this, I was running an entrepreneurship class at Berkeley, and we brought in some Stanford professors and some UC Davis professors, and I shared about their research that they were doing with babies. And it was like this light bulb moment. Wow, this is the future of food. This is the future of personalized medicine. And so you guys being where you are right now in high school, how old are you guys? What grade are they typically in?
Speak up.
Junior.
Juniors. Yeah, so I mean, you're getting ready. You're thinking about college, like what you want to do, and this area. If I could go back in time and go back to college again and study biology again, this is the area that I would hone in on, because this is really if you're interested in any kind of health and wellness or anything related to food, this is the future. This is the next wave. So I guess one of the other things that, other little anecdotes that I always like to share around why, kind of illustrating how important this is and how we've co-evolved with these bacteria, is that it all starts right at birth. So like depending on the third largest ingredient in a mother's breast milk is a molecule called human milk oligosaccharides, right? So this is a type of sugar. And so the mother's spending a lot of energy to build these molecules, and very resource constrained. You guys know how evolution works. You might say, like, all right, this must be extraordinarily important for the infant, right? And it is. But the infant can't digest human milk oligosaccharides. So you'd say, like, why is the third biggest ingredient in breast milk something that an infant cannot even digest? And the answer is that the infant's bacteria is digesting that human milk oligosaccharide. And so this is kind of a perfect case study of how we've co-evolved since for hundreds of thousands of years with these bacteria to be kind of an outsourced organ, right? And so It all starts right from birth, and there's a lot of companies out there right now studying infant health as related to the microbiome, such that, you know, reducing rates of asthma that we've seen very prevalent, especially in high density areas, and reducing rates of food allergies. So that's kind of one, that specific little anecdote around the coevolution with an infant and breast milk was really one of the things that was like, wow, this is not going anywhere. You know, this kind of digestive health, this gut health is kind of, it's not like a fad that's going to, you know, go away in 5 years and then just be the Atkins diet or something like that. This is really here to stay. This is like heart health, or this is just like eating for a healthy brain. You know, now it's really honed in on immune system and digestive health. And so I want to leave room for questions. Hopefully you guys have some. But I'll just go into a little bit more detail around the company that I'm building. And so basically, my co-founder runs the American Gut Project, which is a citizen science project. So that's citizen science is a whole new area of science, specific, you know, especially in biology, where you don't need to be a formal university to participate in doing experiments. And so basically, these are stool kits. These are kits that they'll mail you. You pay $100 and you get one of those cotton Q-tips, and you swab your skin or your toilet paper and send it back, and they'll sequence the DNA for you. And they'll tell you what your sample actually contains. So she's, you know, one of the world's experts in the microbiome, and doing the analysis. And what we're doing is we're working with the former head of Nestle Health. So Nestle is one of the biggest food company, is the biggest food company in the world, as well as the head of Stanford Center for Human Microbiome Studies. And what we're doing is taking a new approach towards alleviating diarrhea. And so diarrhea is obviously one of the sexiest topics you can talk about. And, but in fact, I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with on a day-to-day basis. You know, about 30% of Americans have irritable bowel syndrome, which is either leads to constipation or to diarrhea. So this is a huge issue in the United States. But furthermore, I think longer term, we hope one of the applications of our technology, which is a probiotic and prebiotics, like different types of fiber pill, would be towards children, right? And so diarrhea is actually the #2 killer of children in the world. Mostly not in the United States. You know, we're very lucky here to have good health care, at least for the short term. But you know, like this is literally, you know, one of the biggest killers of children globally. And so, you know, we'd have a larger vision of having that kind of social impact. And I think that's kind of one of the most exciting components of studying biology or studying software, studying hardware, is that, and I think even just being in the Bay Area, is being socially minded. And I think that was an area that I felt very fortunate to have leaders and exposure to that from a young age, like you guys are right now. To be, when you're starting a business, you're really looking for a large pain point that people can pay for, but you're also looking for a larger societal impact, right? So seeing that convergence of business and social impact is something that I've studied and I've incorporated into my projects throughout my career so far, and something that I'd hope that each and one of you thinks about as you go forward in evaluating companies that you want to work for, or companies that you're inevitably going to start. And so I'd say I'd just leave it at that, and open it up to any questions that you guys might have around digestive health or how this is studied. I can try to factor in some more of the diagnostic components or the software components for how it's studied.
Yeah. What's your role in the company?
Yeah, so I'm the founder. So I'm leading the company now, and we're just getting started. And effectively, that is a lot of everything, a lot of like herding cats, right? So it's looking at the supply chain slide to see where we can source the probiotics and the prebiotics, and who can manufacture the pills for us, and doing the clinical studies, so finding research hospitals like Stanford or Kaiser who could do a study for us, because I think especially now more than ever, you need to demonstrate that you're effective, right? You don't want to be selling a product that people don't know if it's going to work or not. You want to have done those studies to show that it works. And as well as, you know, just kind of doing the general business and fundraising and marketing and kind of strategic planning for the future. Yep.
So you mentioned your co-founder, her organization
Yeah.
allows you to buy a kit to like sample your own microbiome.
Yeah.
And so you're paying for that so that you can see it for your own needs.
Yeah.
Is her organization then collecting that data and analyzing it for other scientific purposes?
Yes, I should have closed the loop on that. That's a good point. So you can, it's an opt-in. So most people do opt-in now.
Okay.
And so when you collect that data, it then goes to a larger database that has samples from across the country and across the world that other scientists can use and have access to. I think that's kind of a key area for citizen science and for kind of open source, is the ability for the entire scientific community to benefit from your work. So yeah, it's an opt-in, but I think they have about 15,000 samples or so now that are open sourced. Yeah.
It's more than you can collect by yourself. Really cheap.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I mean, it's certainly more than like an individual lab would be able to do. And you know, I think that the future is, and this is just the start though, because it's beginning, as I mentioned, it's getting so cheap and so easy to do. Eventually, we'll have better tools for on-site testing that you'll have at every hospital, right? So like there are a lot of hospitals that want to do, like UCLA, I think, is doing every single patient they want to do DNA testing and have just a massive database for on the human genetic side. And I think it's easier to study the bacteria because they're single cells, right? They're very simple. There's not a ton of DNA in there, and so you'll see better tools and more widespread use of these new tools and larger data sets as the industry grows. Yeah.
So what kinds of data do you collect from the stool samples?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few different things, right? So there's, depending on how much money you have to analyze that sample, the most basic would be just sequencing a portion of the DNA of the different types of bacteria that you have there to understand kind of, you know what a phylogenetic tree is?
Vaguely.
So it's kind of like an evolutionary tree. It's like where you would place different organisms relative to each other and grouping them by their phylogeny, right? So by their evolution, by their different groupings. And so that's kind of at its most basic. And then at the larger form, you could sequence the entire group of DNA in that bacterial cell, which gives you more data, gives you better analysis to do those groupings. You could also look at the different types of molecules that are those bacteria are producing, because ultimately that's the most important part, right? Is you're translating the genes of those cells into an enzyme or a protein that is going to be influencing the external environment. So that's another area that you can do an analysis on. And yeah, I think kind of the key areas for us as a company are looking at the prebiotics. So that's the different types of fiber that you're eating in your diet. So that's why you want to kind of avoid white foods, you know, like bleached flour. You want to eat as much dietary fiber as possible because that's what your bacteria are consuming for energy. Right? So just like with the human milk oligosaccharides in a mother's milk, on an ongoing basis, what those bacteria are consuming for energy and how they thrive is how much fiber you're getting in your diet. And so that's a key area of understanding, like what types of fiber will influence different types of bacteria such that it can lead to different health outcomes. Yeah.
So you mentioned prebiotics and probiotics.
Sure.
I think a definition between the two would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So probiotic isn't the actual microbe, right? So it's usually a commensal, like it's not going to harm you, bacteria that you're introducing into your system. And so that can come from fermented foods or cultured foods like yogurts or kimchis or kombuchas, which are all very popular products in the Bay Area. And then on the prebiotic side, that's the dietary fiber. And so usually, you have two different types of fiber in terms of soluble and insoluble. Insoluble, we really hone in on the soluble types of fibers. It can be dissolved into water. And so within that, there are several different types of fiber as well. But we always, in the US, we just use like one term to encompass all these different types of molecules, when we really are just at the kind of forefront of understanding how these different molecules will affect the bacterial composition in our gut. And so that's the core difference, is the probiotic is the actual bacteria, and the prebiotic is what feeds your bacteria. And it's usually coming from real foods. Yeah. And so I'll leave that at one last smaller component is this was another kind of shocking data point for me, was there were some Stanford researchers who studied the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, and that's the reason for doing that is to use that as kind of a way to understand what an ancestral human diet would look like, right? And so this tribe was eating about 100 to 200 grams of fiber a day, right? So that's a ton. And the USDA is kind of the governing body that Department of Agriculture gives the recommended guidelines for what an American should be consuming in terms of fiber, and they recommend about 30 to 35 grams, depending on if you're male or female and your age. Yet the average American only eats about 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day, right? So it's about 10% of what our ancestral human selves were eating, and half of what our government is telling us to eat. And as you may or may not know, the government is usually, when it comes to health, is not usually on the forefront of being, setting the best guidelines. So we're constantly starving ourselves, and therefore starving our bacteria of the fiber that they need to thrive. And when you do that, they start eating there's a lining of mucus in our intestines that is rich in these different types of prebiotics. And so they start eating the mucus layer of your intestines. And so when you're young, you're fine. But over time, if you're habitually not giving your bacteria enough fiber, that layer gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And as it gets thinner, it gets closer to your actual human cells, your actual intestinal cells. And when it gets closer to those cells, it gets closer to your white blood cells as well. And so that, even though those bacteria aren't bad, what that then initiates, when it then starts, is telling your immune system, wow, there's a foreign invader in here, let's go on high alert. And then it can lead to things like chronic inflammation. And when you get inflamed, that can lead to all sorts of those other diseases. So I think in biology, I think what I'd appreciate about what you guys do and what you guys have is that you always have to take a perspective of zooming out, right? You can't hone in on one specific component. You have to look at the cascade of events that lead from a beginning to an end, right? And I think this is kind of that perfect testament to that, of this is a whole series of cascade of events that lead to someone getting asthma or having a food allergy or having one of these diseases. And so you have to really take that systems-based approach and really zoom out. And this is a brand new tool to understand, how to influence it and how to help fix these big systematic problems.
Time for one question.
Yeah.
So with all this type of research, are you going to be looking into making a certain type of product to sell to consumers or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think we'll be making a probiotic and prebiotic pill. that to start, and then that will be our our core technology. And then you know, there are all sorts of other outlets that you can, or different form factors that you can build it into, and different mixtures based on different diseases that we can try to solve.
In the future, do you think we'll be able to get custom-made medicines suited to our body types?
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know if that's. Yeah, I mean that's the dream, right? Is towards personalized diets and personalized medicines to understand like how. I think there are a lot of ways that this could play out, but one of which would be like, let's say you are on Lipitor or something for cholesterol, and we'd understand better how your gut bacteria are influencing your metabolism and your digestion of that drug, right? So that we can better dose for an individual. And then of course, you know, like having specific mixes of probiotics or other molecules that are specific to you as an individual. And that, you know, I don't see the future, at least in the next 10 years, as specific to you or me. I see it more as specific to a disease, you know, so like a grouping of individuals who have the same ailment. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. That's the ultimate goal, though. Yep.
You said at the beginning it's a good thing to roll around in the dirt and let a dog lick your face.
That's right.
How literal is that?
Pretty literal, yeah.
Should I stop washing my hands before I eat?
You know, I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think there is a tendency of people to go to be really hypoallergenic and like to use very harsh cleaning products in their homes. And I think this area is really enabling us to be a little bit more mindful, right, that exposure to these bacteria are a good thing, right, or not necessarily a bad thing, right? So you should absolutely wash your hands after you go to the bathroom or ride on the BART. But you know, it's in general, you know, you just want to increase your exposure because that helps inform and regulate your immune system. And basically, the idea of these probiotics is that when you're introducing bacteria that aren't harmful, they can crowd out and outcompete bacteria that are harmful, right? So it's like a little jungle in your guts that's like a constant fight, an evolutionarily adaptive fight between these bacteria to see who's going to be able to compete for resources. And if a non-harmful bacteria can outcompete a harmful one, then that will benefit you, because then that harmful one will take hold.